welcome back to Word Alive on Romans 8:28 Publishing. Elder Mike here with you to bring you another word from God, something that I am always feel good about doing, always feel like I'm doing God's work when I'm doing it, because this is what He has called me to do. And we have a great message for you tonight, and this is going to take a couple of lessons to go through, what we're going to be going through in this series. We're going to be talking about using our power for God's purpose. That's right. God has given each of us power, and we are to use it for God's purpose, not for our own gain, not to glorify us, but we are to use it for God's purpose. And this is one that is near and dear to my heart. And even as I teach, as I think about whenever God has given me an assignment to teach, when I just focus on doing what God told me to do, how He told me to do it, it goes one way. It goes well. It goes smoothly. I've got pieces as I'm going through it. But man, sometimes you know how we do. Sometimes I'll get into, well, how do I get more people to watch? Or how do I make the effects better here? Or I start getting myself into it and I start worrying about how's this going to make me look? And I tell you, whenever I fall into that trap, I tell you, it's always more aggravating. It's more stressful. It feels like there's technical difficulties all over the place. And it just doesn't have the same impact as when I'm just going and doing what God told me to do, how God told me to do it. So that's what I'm here to do tonight, is just give you the word as God has given it to me, because He truly has given each of us gifts, and we are to use those gifts. We're to use the power that He gave us for His purpose, not for our own. So if He has given you a voice, an anointed voice that can touch people, to use that voice not to make yourself famous, but to make Jesus more famous. If God has given you the gift of being able to make money, using that money, using that power, using that gift to build God's kingdom and not to build your own kingdom. If God has given you the power of exhortation, it's about exhorting people to do good and not evil. It's about exhorting people to build God's kingdom and not yours. It's about using it to draw people closer to Jesus and not to try and get them to follow you, using that exhortation for God's purpose. And that's what we're going to be looking at in this series. Probably going to be three lessons in this one. And we're going to be looking we're going to be looking through the book of Judges. We're going to look at two very well-known gentlemen from the book of Judges. We're going to be looking at Samson. We're going to look at Samson first, and then we're going to look at Gideon. And as we look at Samson and as we look at Gideon, we're going to look at one really uses his power that God has given him for God's purpose, and does it voluntarily and does it without having to be pushed. And he does it, and we see his reign goes a certain way. The other one has to be pushed and prodded and dragged into using his power for God's purpose. And he's got a whole different life that he lives as a result of it. So we're going to be looking at Samson and Gideon as we go through these next three lessons in using our power for God's purpose. And this is truly a lesson that is for everybody. I've talked to so many people who don't realize the gift that they have and the power that gift can have when we use it to build God's kingdom. This is not just for people who have this great anointed as a preacher, who tens of thousands of people come to see him. If your gift is to just smile at somebody and have a warm smile that invites people, that welcomes people, that gift is just as powerful as the preacher that's preaching before 10,000 people. And even if he's not preaching what God told him to preach, your smile's got more power than those great words that he's speaking, because you're doing it as God has told you to do it. And you're doing it the way that God, and using it the way that God has directed you to use it. And one gift is never to be compared with another. And we can even get an illustration of this by looking at Samson and Gideon. Because I think about, if you look at when you were in vacation Bible school as a kid, and if you were looking at, they were doing Judges in vacation Bible school, and you see the picture of Samson, all muscular, carrying around gates that weighed 5,000 pounds each on his shoulders, and hearing about him slaying lions with his bare hands, and then you hear about Gideon. Gideon, the angel of the Lord came to Gideon and he said, Gideon, you're going to deliver the people. And Gideon says, well, what do you mean? That my clan is the weakest in all of Manasseh and I am the least in my family. So how am I going to be the one that's going to deliver the people? And we see that as we go through this, right? We would look at that and say, I want Samson's gift. I want that power. I want that strength that he puts on display. I don't want this humility. I don't want this humbleness that Gideon has. But that gift of humility served Gideon so well. Why? Because he used it for God's purpose. So whatever your gift is, don't compare it to somebody else's. Don't desire somebody else's. Just take the gifts, the power that God has given you and use it for God's purpose. Take the gift that he has given you and marry it to that assignment that God has given you. And you're going to see that your life will flow more smoothly, that you will have more impact on the kingdom of God, that you will bring more of heaven down to earth, regardless of what the gift is. If you use it for God's purpose, it will bring tremendous power with it. So we're going to see here first that we got to learn that everybody has gifts and we're all to use them for God's purpose. But I want to look at one other thing here too. The second thing we're going to look at is, as we go through this lesson, is regardless of if you use that power for God's purpose or not, whether you make a conscious decision to go out and use that power for God's purpose, he is going to get his will done through your power. He's going to get his will done through your life. Now the question is, do you want it to go peacefully? Do you want to be strengthened by what you go through as you're using that power, or do you want to be weakened by it? Do you want to have a life of chaos? If you want that peaceful life, if you want that peace in your spirit, and if you want the power to flow, then use it willingly for God's kingdom. Don't make him drag you into what he has assigned you to do. And we're going to start by looking at the book of Judges. We're going to start in verse 13 because we're going to be looking at Samson first. And as we look at Samson, we're going to see here that God very clearly, there's no mystery, there's no mystique to it in what he wants Samson to do, what Samson is called to be, and how he is called to act. We're going to look at chapter 13 of Judges, and we're going to begin at verse 1. And it says, again, the Israelites did evil in the eyes of the Lord. So the Lord delivered them into the hands of the Philistines for 40 years. And a certain man of Zorah named Manoah from the clan of the Danites had a wife who was childless, unable to give birth. The angel of the Lord appeared to her and said, you are barren and childless, but you are going to become pregnant and give birth to a son. Now see to it that you drink no wine or other fermented drink, and that you do not eat anything unclean. You will become pregnant and have a son whose head is never to be touched by a razor, because the boy is a Nazirite, dedicated to God from the womb. And here you go. Here's the assignment. Here's what we're judging all of Samson's actions by, not by what we think he should be doing, not by what he thinks he should be doing, but by what God says he should be doing. And God tells him he will take the lead in delivering Israel from the hands of the Philistines. And so we see here that it's very clearly stated what his assignment is. We see here very clearly stated what is the purpose in the power that God is going to bless him with. Even before he is placed in his mother's womb, we see that he has been given his assignment, that the assignment is known before we are even created, before we are even born. God already has our assignment laid out for us. And just understand this, because you haven't been written about in the Bible yet, God still did for you. Because we see here, we're going to read from Psalms 139. We're going to start at verse 13. And it says, for you created my inmost being. You knit me together in my mother's womb. And emphasize the me as you're reading this to yourself. I praise you because I am fearfully and wonderfully made. Your works are wonderful, and I know that full well. My frame was not hidden from you when I was made in the secret place, when I was woven together in the depths of the earth. Your eye saw my unformed body, and the days ordained for me were written in your book before even one of them came to be. That's right, that God, just the same way that he had Samson prepared before he was even in the womb, he has the same for you. He has the same vision for you. He has the same plan for you. And truth be told, we think that we know ourselves, but we do not know ourselves anywhere near as well as God knows us, because our vision of ourselves, our view of ourselves can be affected by what we look at on Facebook. We see how somebody else is living, we see what somebody else is doing, and it affects how we see ourselves by this bombardment of what we see when we're scrolling. We see that as we sit and watch TV, and the television tells us that we need this and we want that, and if you want to be popular, you need to be more like this, and you got to be thinner, or no, you got to be fatter, or no, you got to be more muscular, or no, you got to be in better shape, or all these, oh, you know, you need more hair, whatever it might be, because all these things, and I think about even the things that people say to us will affect how we see ourselves. So God knows us. Even think about it, with things that you were said, things that were done to you when you were 2, 3, 4, 5 years old, affect how you see yourself today. There is nobody that knows you better than God, including yourself. So if you have any inkling of a doubt of who you are, get off all that other stuff, shut it out, and spend some time with God and let him show you who you truly are, because he knit you together in your mother's womb, just like he knit together Samson in his mother's womb. And just like he had a plan for Samson, he has a plan for you. He has a plan for me. He has a plan for us together as well. And we know that the plans he has for us, Jeremiah 29 and 11, I know the plans I have for you, says the Lord, plans for hope and a future, plans for hope and a future, plans to prosper you and not harm you. So he's got good plans for you. And again, if you have any doubt, if you're not sure what that plan is, get off of Facebook, get out from in front of the TV, get in your word, get in prayer, get away from those people that are trying to hold you to your past and not push you to the grand future that God has for you. And you will see that just like he had a plan for Samson, just like he put power in Samson, he has put power in you as well. And we see just as plainly as he has stated Samson's purpose, that he is there to lead the people in freeing Israel from the Philistines. We see it. It's stated there very plainly. And he goes on to say, as we wrap up the end of chapter 13, we see starting in chapter 13, I got to jump back to the book of Judges here. At the end of chapter 13, we see here that it says, the woman gave birth to a boy and named him Samson. He grew, and the Lord blessed him, and the Spirit of the Lord began to stir him while he was in Manasseh, Dan, between Zorah and Eshtaol. And so we see here, not only has he been given his assignment, but now at the end of chapter 13, we see that the Spirit of the Lord is stirring him, right? So now he not only has the assignment, but he has the Spirit of God in him. The power is now welling up within him to do what God has assigned him to do. And what are we talking about today? So he's got the assignment, he's got the power. He's got the purpose, he's got the power. And what are we talking about tonight? Using our power for God's purpose. So let's take a look as we go into chapter 14 and ask ourselves, is good old Samson, powerful Samson, I want to be just like Samson, is he using his power for God's purpose? And as we look at going into chapter 14, verse 1 says, Samson went down to Timnah and saw there a young Philistine woman. When he returned, he said to his father and mother, I have seen a Philistine woman in Timnah. Now get her for me as my wife. So let's look at this. Is he using his power for God's purpose? Because the Spirit is stirring him. He's got the power. But what's he doing? If you understand what Timnah was a Philistine-controlled area in Israel at this time in the book of Judges. And where do we see Samson? He's not down there driving out the Philistines. He's down there getting nice and cozy with the Philistines. He's down there socializing with the Philistines. He's not in any kind of conflict with the Philistines. He's getting along with them, and it's certainly not the Spirit of God driving him down there. It looks like it's more his hormones that are driving him down there, because he saw a girl with all the curves in all the right places, and he says, that's the one that I have to have. Clearly he didn't get to know her, because you know what? We're going to learn more about that later on in the story. And as it goes on, it says, his father and mother replied, isn't there an acceptable woman among your relatives or among all our people? Must you go to the uncircumcised Philistine to get a wife? So here, even as he's making this request, even as he's walking in disobedience, his parents don't come out and say it, but they even know what he's doing is not right. They're recalling in Deuteronomy chapter 7 verse 3, where God tells them, you will not give your sons to the people, the land that you're going into. You won't give your sons to their daughters for marriage. You won't give your daughters to their sons for marriage. You're not to intermarry with them, because they're going to become a snare to you. They're going to become a trap to you. They're going to draw you away from me. And in this book of Judges, we can see what happens. It's when they get cozy with the nations around them that they get themselves in trouble. So we see here that he is not doing what he's been called to do. He's down there cozying up to the very people he's supposed to be drawing out. And then it goes on to say, it says in verse 4 here, but Samson said to his father, I love this line, get her for me. She's the right one for me. So here we see Samson not doing what's right in God's eyes. He's doing what's right in his eyes. And God, he knows how we are. And God, we're going to see as we go on through here, that God will reveal to us whether they really were right, even though they were right in our eyes. And I think about, I've heard stories about, a man meets a woman and she looks real good. The eyes are soft, the hair is pretty, the skin is smooth. She got curves in all the right places. Yeah, and he thinks, oh, that one's right for me. That's right in my eyes. But you know what? He takes her home that night, and the next morning when she wakes up and she's got her wig off, and she's got no makeup on, and the eyelashes are off, and the girdle is on the floor, and everything, and all the curves suddenly weren't in all the right places. We go, you know what? Maybe she was right in my eyes last night, but apparently she was not right. Amen? So we see this is what God will reveal to us who it is. We just got to identify it. When he shows us it's not the right one, when he shows us it's not the right path, we've got to just have enough sense to turn around and back up off of what it is that we're chasing after. And this is the thing here, and this is where I want to stress here, where it shows us God's will is going to be done, right? It's a matter of, do you want to let him go before you and fight for you, or do you want him behind you, pushing you into what it is that he has for you? Because I love this, and I love this because sometimes there's little things in the scripture that we can sometimes kind of maybe not realize the importance of. And after he says she's the right one for me, there's a little in parentheses there. And I know sometimes when I read something in parentheses, I take it almost like a throwaway or an afterthought. Oh, and by the way, blah, 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 right? But it says here, his parents did not know, in parentheses, his parents did not know that this was from the Lord, who was seeking an occasion to confront the Philistines, for at that time they were ruling over Israel. So here's Samson not doing what he's supposed to do, and God saying, now I know this boy, I knit him together in his mother's womb. What is it that's going to get him to fight and drive out these Philistines? Well, he said, I know he's got an eye for that lady, so I'm going to let him get the lady. Why? Not so that he can have the lady he wanted, not because she is the right one, but because it's going to have my will be done. And now we're going to look at how does this relationship that he's so happy that he got, this is the right one, how God knew ahead of time and had it all orchestrated so that this wrong that he's trying to do is going to lead to God's will being done. But as we're going to see here, what happens is, now that his mom and dad are saying, okay, we're going to go get you this woman for your wife, and they go down to meet her, and on the way down there, Samson comes upon a lion. And this lion, he rips this lion apart with his bare hands, kills the lion, and they go down, and the parents arrange the marriage. And then later on, as they're going down for the wedding feast, Samson comes across that lion again. And he notices as he passes the lion that there is some honey, a hive of bees in the lion, and there's honey in there. And so he takes his hand and he scoops some of the honey out of that lion, and he eats it. And this is an important thing to realize too. When we don't use our power for God's purpose, the path that it puts us on, when we don't appreciate and value the power that God has given us and use it for His purpose, because what happened is Samson is a Nazirite. So there's a couple of things that come along with this, right? We've got the fact that, first of all, he was not allowed to cut his hair. He's not allowed to taste fermented drink. Nothing's allowed to touch his lips, any fermented drink. And the other thing is, you're not allowed to even touch a carcass. So here we have Samson in coldness, not doing what God has told him to do. He hasn't necessarily violated a direct order from him yet, but we see where it leads to. It leads to him now, he's not even allowed to touch a carcass, not allowed to touch a dead body of any sort. And here he is scooping food out of a carcass and eating it. Think about, that's where when we grow cold in our power, when we don't appreciate where our power came from, that's what happens is we start sliding down this slope into where we're just doing things that are flat out wrong, things that are going to jeopardize that power, things that are going to weaken our power and take it away from us. And here's Samson eating from the carcass. And now he goes down after this, and he goes down to the festival. And here's where God really gets creative with things, because here's Samson. He's down at the festival, and God is like, I got to get him to start fighting off and driving out these Philistines. And so but yet Samson is still trying to get closer and closer to them, because at this wedding feast, we're going to see that he has 30 attendants at that wedding feast. Are any of his family members? Are any of them his friends? Are any of them even Israelites? No. He has 30 attendants at this wedding feast, and every one of them is a Philistine. The very people, again, that he's supposed to be driving out. And here he is drawing closer and closer and closer to these people. So God puts a little thought in Samson's head. And Samson goes on and he says he's thinking about the lion and the honey that he ate out of the lion, and he gives these 30 attendants of his, he says, I want to tell you what, I'm going to give you a riddle, and if you can solve it, then I'm going to give you 30 linen garments and 30 outer garments. But if you can't figure it out, then you've got to give me 30 linen garments and 30 outer garments. And so he gives them the riddle. He says, out of the strong something sweet, out of the eater something to eat. Amen? And so we see he gives them this riddle, and after 3 days, they still can't figure it out. And these lovely Philistine folks that he's cozying up to, they don't like the fact that they're going to have to buy him these garments. And so what do? They go to his wife, and they tell her, if you don't get him to tell you what the answer to that riddle is, we're gonna burn you and your family. Amen? So we see, and here's the character of the people that he's associating with himself. And so his wife comes to him, and his wife pleads with him, and she says, you know what, just tell me, you if you really loved me, you would tell me, baby. And he knows he shouldn't tell her. He says, I didn't even tell my parents, but yet he tells her. And now on the last day of the feast, the men come to him and they say, we figured it out. They say, what's stronger than a lion and what's sweeter than honey? You're talking about honey eaten out of the lion. And so they guess this, and now Samson's mad, because now Samson knows that his wife has betrayed him. And so he decides, okay, you know what? Watch what you wish for, because you want your 30 garments? I'm going to go get your 30 garments. He goes to another village full of Philistines. He kills 30 of them, and he brings the garments back for those attendants that he had. And he is so mad at his wife for betraying him that he goes off and he goes back home, and he leaves it all behind him for a time. And surely, if God's command to him was not enough, that he would do what God told him to do. This certainly should be enough that they've shown their character, and it will be a reminder to him that he's supposed to be driving them out. This is certainly a lesson that even a child could have learned this lesson, but not so fast, because you know what? We don't always learn our lessons. I remember even as my son was very young, and I remember one time, you know, it was a little while before dinner, and he asked me for a cookie, and I said, no cookies till after dinner. But then I got a phone call, and I went to make my phone call, and as I came back in, he's missing, so I go into the kitchen, I see him. Where is he at? He's at the counter, grabbing the cookie jar, trying to get a cookie. So here he's been caught. Now he's punished. He's not allowed to have any treats for 2 weeks, and that's the punishment. And certainly, right, he learned his lesson from that. He's not going to go trying to get into the cookies again. In fact, I even took the cookies. I'm like, I'm not going to tempt him. I'm going to put the cookies up on top of the refrigerator. And then what happens? 3 days later, I'm thinking he's learned his lesson. I'm thinking he's learning his lesson. And what happens? I come in to make dinner, and where's my son? He's standing on the counter, reaching up on top of the refrigerator to get the cookies. So he didn't learn, even though he learned what happens when he doesn't, even though he's experienced the consequences, he still doesn't learn his lesson, and he still keeps on pushing on. Well, I'm going to tell you what, this woman, amen, was Samson's cookie jar. He had received his revelation from it. He received his discipline from it. He received his lesson from it. But yet he still goes back to the cookie jar. Because we see what happens. He did not learn his lesson. He goes back later at the time of the harvest, and he takes a goat for his wife. And he takes the goat, and he goes to see her father. And as he goes to see her father, her father says, well, you can't go see her. And I imagine this is very awkward, because as Samson's sitting there in his living room saying, I'd like to go see my wife now, his father's saying, well, I'm sorry, I thought you hated her. I gave her to somebody else. And here's Samson. Now Samson is furious. The father tries to appease him, saying, but she's got a really pretty sister. You want to take the pretty sister instead? But no, Samson is so mad that here's what Samson says. And this is something that I'm telling you, it's one of those things that makes me say, how can people be like that, even though I'm actually like this at times? Because Samson says, he says that this time, right, now that you have wronged me like this, you've given my wife away, he says, this time I have a right to even get even with the Philistines and will really harm them. So now I have the right to get even with the Philistines. The fact that God commanded me to do it, that didn't give me the right to do it. The fact that they were oppressing your people, the fact that they were ravaging your land, that didn't give you the right to harm them. But boy, now that they have offended you, now that they have done wrong to you, anybody ever been in that position? God told you to do something, but that God said, cut that person off, and you wouldn't cut them off. But you know what? Then they wronged you. Okay, now I got the right to cut them off. No, you had the right to cut them off as soon as God told you to. So he really does know us, and he will do that thing that he needs to do to get us to move. Even though, again, if we will do it willingly, it's going to be much more natural. It's not going to be fear. We're not going to be living in anger. We're not going to be living in hostility. I mean, look at Samson here. His life is all about anger, hostility, hatred. It didn't have to be that way if he would have started off using his power for God's purpose. So Samson, he gets very creative in how he's going to attack these Philistines, and he goes and he gathers 300 foxes. Takes 300 foxes, he ties their tails, ties them in pairs together by their tails. So you've got 150 pairs of foxes tied together at their tails, and then he takes a torch, ties it to the tails of the foxes, lights it, and sets the foxes loose in the vineyards and in the grain fields of the Philistines. And you can imagine that 150 pairs of fox dragging fire through a grain field can do quite a bit of damage. So here he has wiped out all the grain fields, all the vineyards, all the orchards of the Philistines, and now the Philistines are mad, right? So it's the next level on the escalator. God's going to keep escalating it until his will is done. And so these Philistines, these people that Samson has befriended, these people that he was cozying up with, you know what they do? they go and they burn his wife and her father to death. And now Samson is furious. Next level, next floor on the escalator. God is going to keep pushing it until his will is done. And so now Samson goes, and he's so furious that he goes and he just is so mad that he wipes out a bunch of Philistines. He takes out a big group of them, and now really is now what God is doing is God is creating this tension. God is creating this confrontation that needed to be created in order for his will to be done. And after Samson kills these Philistines, he goes off to a cave to be by himself for a little bit. And the next thing that we see really is interesting because it shows us another level where Samson was not doing what God had called him to do. Because the Philistines don't go after him themselves. The Philistines go and get 3,000 Israelites to go and capture Samson and bring him to them. And so these 3,000 Israelites, they go up to the cave and they're telling Samson, they're telling him, you've got to come with us because if not, these Philistines are going to wipe us out. And Samson says something that I think is kind of interesting. He says, well, I'll tell you what. If you promise not to kill me yourselves, I'll let you bind me up and I'll let you take me to the Philistines. And so they agree to it. And as I was thinking, I'm like, boy, I can't imagine. It would be shocking enough to me if my family betrayed me like that. But if I actually had to ask my family, you promise not to kill me yourself before you go, I might look around and say, maybe I've been doing something wrong. Maybe there's some dysfunction in my family that I haven't been addressing. Maybe there's an assignment that I've had that I shouldn't be doing. But again, God is going to do what he needs to do to have his will be done. So here we have Samson being brought to the Philistines. And as he approaches the Philistines, he is able to break his bonds like it was charred flax. So imagine if you had flax, which is like a grain, and you're bound in that. And imagine it's set on fire. It's charred, very brittle, very easy to break. He breaks it like it's nothing. He grabs the jawbone of a donkey and he kills 1,000 men with that jawbone of the donkey. And this is the interesting thing I find here when I think about this. First of all, if we think about what his assignment was, and this is very subtle, but it's very substantial. His assignment was to lead the people in delivering Israel. And here the very people that he's supposed to be leading are turning him over to the Philistines. Why? Because he didn't do what God called him. He was supposed to be leading the people in delivering them. So this is the thing. It doesn't say he should deliver the Israelites. It says he's going to lead others. And here we see he's leading nobody. Because even though he is now confronting the Philistines, even though now he is in conflict with the Philistines, he's still not doing it completely because he's supposed to be leading the people. Instead, what is it? The people are leading him to the Philistines. And the thing that strikes me as odd about this too is once he has killed 1,000 men with the jawbone of a donkey, when he's done, he is so thirsty that he petitions God. He says, you have given me this great victory. And he says, now must. I love he uses this word must. Now must I die of thirst and become subject to these uncircumcised people, right? And I could just imagine God being like, no, you didn't must die of thirst. You didn't even have to be thirsty. And I could imagine if I was God, I'd be like, no, because if you had just done it my way, you wouldn't even been thirsty, much less dying of thirst. So go find yourself some water. Go get some water. There, you know what? You just take a walk around the bend. There's a creek about 10 miles down that way. You go get it yourself. But our God is so good. Our God is so gracious. And our God knows that he still has work for Samson to do. And so God opens up a space and water comes forth for Samson to drink. But the thing is this, I think about this now. He's asking, must I die of thirst? Oh, it's so dramatic. Must I die of thirst, God? No, you didn't even. Think about if he killed 1,000 men with the jawbone of a donkey by himself, those 3,000 men that brought him there, what if he had gotten those 3,000 men together trained with them, trained them, armed them. What could he have done going against the Philistines with those 3,000 armed, trained men behind him? If he had led the people in delivering Israel from the Philistines like God had told him, he wouldn't have even needed to break a sweat, because not only, and the 3,000 armed people going with him is a small portion of why the victory would have been so much easier. You know what the bigger reason is why the victory would have been so much easier? Because God would have been there fighting before them, that God would have had the victory laid out before him, that God would have been taking on the enemy instead of them having to take the enemy on himself. So we see here that Samson is living this chaotic, hectic, anger-filled, conflict-filled life that brings him nothing but trouble, because he won't use his power for God's purpose. If he had done things the way that God had told him to, there would have been no "must I die of thirst, must I go through this." There wouldn't have been all the anger, there wouldn't have been all the hurt of being betrayed, there wouldn't have been all the anger, there wouldn't have been all these things going on in his life if he had just done it the way that God had told him to do it. So we see here in Samson, and we haven't even gotten through all the Samson in drama's life yet. We're going to see next week, we're going to see a little bit more of the drama that he brings on himself. But then we're going to see a key element that turns it around and gives him his greatest victory. And that's what we're going to touch on next week. But this week, what have we seen? We've seen a man with great power. We've seen a man who was knit together in his mother's womb, that was given an assignment, that was given a plan, and tried to walk away from it, tried not to do it. And when he did, what happened? God, we learned, is going to have his will done, that God is going to make sure that his will is done. We see a man, though, who although is doing God's will unwillingly, we see a man that is in torment, a man that has a chaotic, angry, vengeful life. He's going forth as a spiteful child and not a leader of men. And if we want swifter, more decisive victories in our life, if we want to know the peace that God has that makes the Christian life so beautiful, if we want to know the power that makes the Christian life so beautiful, if we want to have those more decisive victories, if we want to avoid those unnecessary struggles in our lives, we've got to do what? We've got to use the power that God has given us to the assignment that he has given us. We've got to use the power that he has given us for the purpose that he gave it to us. And when we marry, and I say marry, we bind them together. We bind together our assignment with our gifts. We take the gifts that he has given us, whatever that gift is, whether it's a smile, whether it's an encouraging word, whether it's a pleasant disposition, whether it's a beautiful voice, whether it's a knowledge of the scriptures, whether it's being an eloquent speaker, whether it's just having a caring heart for people, whether it's a hug, whatever the gift that he gives you, if we marry that, if we line it up with his assignment that he has on our lives, we can see, and our job may not be, our assignment may not be to deliver a whole nation like Samson's was. Our assignment might be to deliver our children, 3 uncles, 2 cousins, 5 co-workers, and 23 neighbors. That might be our assignment. But if we marry that assignment to the gifts that God has given us, we're going to see how those victories come naturally, how those victories flow, how there's not a constant struggle, a constant argument, a constant fight, and constant chaos to get us to the point where we're doing what God has given us to do. So I just want you to encourage you as you take a look at this. We're getting deep into it here, but join us next week, because we're going to look at, even through all this, Samson still has not learned his lesson. Samson has been shown multiple times by God what he needs to do, and he still is going to keep going down that wrong path. But what I love is, we're going to see at the end of Samson's story that Samson turns back to the source of his power, that he turns back to God and realizes the error of his ways. And when he does, we're going to see that Samson will have the greatest victory that he has in all of his battles. So I want you to tune in next week to learn how that turn back to God, when you realize you've gone wrong, can bring about your greatest victory. So I pray that this has been a blessing to you. I hope that you will share this with as many people as you can, so that more people can realize the power that they they have, and how that power lined up with God's purpose can lead to a more peaceful, prosperous, and blessed life. So God bless you. Remember that Jesus loves you, and so do we. Have a blessed, blessed evening.